This show is brought to you by SalCal Real Estate Connections. Welcome to Telescope View. We're here tonight with the author of The Final Revelation, The Sun Project, Rick Teles, co-host, and my favorite Martian, Steve Parker. And also, I want to welcome our live audience tonight to the show, as we're going to talk about some very interesting subjects. And tonight's show is going to be about a subject concerning the outer limits of our solar system. And what makes it interesting is it has some Sumerian legend to it, right, Rick?
Oh yeah, everybody loves the Sumerians, right? We all talk about the Sumerians. Yeah, tonight's topic has something to do with the whole ancient astronaut theory. Everybody's heard of that. Has extraterrestrial life been here in the past? Well, the question that we're going to talk about tonight is this thing called Planet 9 or Planet X, the planet Nibiru of Sumerian legend. Okay, and I see Steve's looking at me saying, "Oh, okay."
The planet in the Nibiru?
Oh, yeah, planet Nibiru. Okay, so what is all this? Okay, over the last few years, scientists at Caltech, California Institute of Technology, have discovered what they say is solid evidence for this thing that's called Planet X or Planet 9, which is on the fringe of our solar system. Okay, I mean, technically this Planet 9, as they call it, hasn't actually been spotted yet, but they can tell it's there the way they can tell other planets are out there by the movement of other objects within the sky. Planet X or Planet 9 is called a trans-Neptunian object, TNO, and it's on the very fringe of our solar system. At the very edge of our solar system, it's called the heliosphere. That's where the power of the sun starts to weaken, its gravitational fields and all that type of thing. And we're talking a long way out there, okay? We're talking in terms of things called astronomical units or AUs. Every astronomical unit equals the distance between the Earth and the sun, which is 93 million miles, okay? So what we're talking about is this object out there called Planet 9. And if we look on the chart here, we can see this dotted line, and that is the elliptical orbit of Planet 9. Okay, now you can notice it's different from all the other orbits. If we go to the very center here, these little dots right in the center, that's our solar system. The very center of those teeny tiny dots is the sun. And this last circle out here, this lightest one, this is Neptune. So this planet is actually orbiting in an elliptical orbit on the outside of Neptune. At its closest point, it'll be somewhere between 200 to 600 AUs, okay? So an AU, again, is once the distance, 93 million miles from the Earth to the sun. So we're talking anywhere from 180 to 58 billion miles away from us.
Excuse me, how do they know it's there? I'm sorry, how do they know it's there?
That's the question, okay? What is Planet Nibiru? Well, Planet Nibiru, okay, is supposedly the ancient Sumerians. Okay, this is a culture that was in Mesopotamia. It flourished about 4,500 BC. That's before Christ. It went from 6,200 to 1,900 years BC. Well, according to the Sumerians, they believe the Anunnaki, their sky gods, came from this mythical planet called Nibiru. And according to ancient Sumerian texts, okay, this planet had an elliptical orbit or an elongated orbit within our solar system that lasted anywhere from 3,600 to 10,000 years.
Wow.
Okay. Now these are people 4,900 years prior to the birth of Christ were talking about this planet. How did they know this?
They couldn't see it.
They couldn't see it. We can't see it. That's part of the problem. Now, if we look at this, it's interesting that its orbit will go anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 years, according to Caltech. Very close to what the Sumerians were talking about, okay? They said their sky gods came from this planet. When it reached its closest approach to Earth, or within our solar system, that the sky gods came from that planet and came to Earth, all right? Now, the thing is that these ancient Sumerian texts, a lot of them were found in the 19th century. There are thousands of them. There's so many of these texts and tablets that they're still studying them today. And the ancient Sumerians wrote in a form called cuneiform. We've seen them, they're like dots. They look like dots on and triangles on a stone tablet or on their tablet, okay? The other thing about the Sumerians is that they had an advanced civilization they had an elaborate language, mathematics, art, all of this at 4,900 years BC. And now how was all this possible? Now, according to Sumerian mythology and what they saw in this text and these tablets, is that in the beginning, human-like sky gods ruled over Earth. Now, where have we heard that story before? We've talked on this show before that according to classified reports that some people have revealed is that an alien race that supposedly we know about, they don't look like the wild creatures we see in Hollywood. They look like us. They look like what we're doing today on Mars or what we're doing today on some of the outer planets, that they look a lot like them. And they say that in the beginning, the human sky gods, they ruled over Earth, and they looked just like the Earthlings. Well, the problem that happened then is that according to Sumerian legend, the first human being was created by the sky gods. Okay? Now, you'll hear the term Anunnaki a lot when people talk about the Sumerians. Anunnaki is the name given to the sky gods for the Sumerians. And the reason for that was the principal god or the main god was Anu. And all the other gods were called Anunnaki because they came after him. Now, the other interesting thing that we hear from a Sumerian legend, two things. One is that these sky gods, each sky god ruled over a particular city, which is kind of an interesting concept because if you're familiar with occupations after wars, what's the first thing that we do when we occupy a country like we did in Japan? We assign governors for different groups. All right. So that was an interesting concept that they had, 4,900 years before Christ. The other thing, they talked about something called the garden in lower Mesopotamia. And these are where the human beings were created and where they resided to begin with. Okay? And it was interesting, it said initially human beings were unable to reproduce on their own, but the sky gods modified them. And the garden they relate to as the Garden of Eden.
Okay.
So it's an interesting story that starts far beyond anything that we hear in the Bible, anything that we've even heard, around the time of Christ. This is 6,200 to 4,900 years prior to Christ even being born.
Now, I have a question, Rick. When you're talking this time period, where exactly in the world are the Sumerians located?
Well, that was the
Is that modern day what?
Well, that would be modern day Iraq, the Mesopotamian valleys. Okay, so they're in it. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing on this chart, we're seeing this dotted orbit here, and that's supposed to be planet 9. And the reason that they know it's there is because of all these elliptical orbits on the other side. These are other trans-Neptunian objects. They're much smaller. The largest trans-Neptunian object that's there, its number is actually Pluto, which is a dwarf planet.
What do the numbers mean? Are those years when they traveled there?
Those are the years that this object was discovered. Okay. And they can see that they're being pushed into an orbit, and they maintain this orbit. And the only time that happens, according to NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, is when there's another body forcing them to do this. This is how we know there are exoplanets out there. We can tell that they're orbiting a star, and we can tell by the movements within the star field that something is pushing on them. And this is how they determine that there are actually planets out there. So what we're seeing is that at some point, this planet Nibiru, or this planet 9, is going to come on the very fringes of our solar system.
Now, let me ask you a question. Will we physically be able to see this at some point?
We won't. Some of the best telescopes will be able to see them. But the problem is, even with Pluto, at about 100 astronomical units, everything gets very dim. It's very hard to see anything with a telescope. And when you're talking at something 600 to 1,000 astronomical units out in space, we're not going to be able to see that till it gets much closer. Now, according to Caltech, they think in the next 16 to 24 months, we're going to see this thing. We're going to be able to by telescope.
But can they make stronger telescopes? I mean, that must be in the future.
I guess it's possible, but because the light is so dim out there, even telescopes like Kepler and Hubble have trouble seeing this. They can see large nebulas and they can see stars and things, but a planet doesn't give off the same reflectiveness as a star.
Do they have an idea how big this planet is?
Yes, that's the other thing that caught them by surprise. Is most trans-Neptunian objects are small. The biggest one that they had seen prior to this was Pluto. Planet 9 is about the size of Neptune.
But just so people know, how big is Pluto compared to Earth?
Well,
there you go.
Funny you should ask that question.
I'm glad I asked.
Okay. At the bottom of the photo here, we have Earth.
Okay.
Okay, and you can see Pluto up in the upper left corner there. That's the size of Pluto. And those are some of the other trans-Neptunian objects. This thing is 10 times the mass of Earth.
Wow.
Some people say 20 times the mass of Earth. Okay, well, how big is that? That would be the size of Pluto, of Neptune. which is 10 times the size of Earth.
Oh, okay.
This is why it's caught their attention. Otherwise, it might not catch their attention. It's just there's thousands of these objects out there. There's also something out there that we're not going to get into, literally or theoretically, called the Kuiper Belt. And there's thousands upon thousands of objects within this Kuiper Belt, and it's believed to be the remnants of the creation of the entire universe, debris and pieces. But when we get closer in, as we start to get closer with our solar system, which is still, pretty large, that's when it catches their attention, something that large moving so many objects out of the way. Now, another question you get is it going to have any effect on our solar system or anything?
Gravity-wise?
Gravity-wise,
Yep.
yeah. And the answer to make everybody feel comfortable is they don't know. They're not sure because they've never seen anything like this before.
So this thing could actually disturb another orbit somewhere.
That's a possibility.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, the thing is, when you look at this, though, you can see the big elliptical orbit. It's obviously the object is not that big, and it's about the size of Neptune. Our sun is still bigger than this object by many orders of magnitude. So you can see how powerful the gravity and the attraction of the sun is to keep this thing in an orbit.
But just excuse me, Rick, do those numbers again. I'm always blown away by that, like how many universes and galaxies and, just stars and all that.
We're looking at one little solar system.
Okay.
Little solar system in a medium-sized galaxy. Okay. So we'll start there. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is a medium-sized galaxy of about 100,000 light years wide. How far is a light year? A light year is about 5 trillion miles. So 100,000 times 5 trillion, a lot of zeros. Okay. According to Kepler, what they learned from Kepler and Hubble and some of the other studies, according to them, on average, there are 40 billion planets in every galaxy that could harbor life like ourselves. And this
40 billion.
40 billion. And this is coming from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, NASA.
We think we're the only ones that have.
You can look that up. Okay, but wait, the number gets bigger because the estimate today, and some people say the estimate is from 40 billion to 80 billion. The number of galaxies that they believe they are aware of today is 100 million.
Wow.
100 million galaxies, 40 billion planets in each one. And some are bigger galaxies, so they may have more than 40 billion. So you're talking about odds here. What are the odds that we're the only ones? It seems to be a waste of a lot of space if we are.
But we think maybe the other ones aren't even anything like this. That's why, when you say it doesn't mean there's people or,
Right. It may not be people. The question then comes about, it may not even be a carbon-based life form. We're starting to learn that you don't have to have carbon to have life. In the 20th century, even in the 1980s, if you said that, you're crazy. It can't happen. In the 21st century, we know that for a fact. We also know, we were talking about this the other day with somebody, the devil worms of Africa. Anybody ever hear of the devil worms of Africa, Mephisto worms? They were found, it was an experiment to see what lived down there. They were a mile down in a gold mine.
Wow.
And this researcher...
and they're called devil worms.
She found these things, she called them devil worms.
Because they're so far down.
They're so far down, they were living in water that they believe could be 1 billion years old.
In Earth?
In Earth.
Okay.
Deep inside the Earth, and these worms lived without any sunlight and any chemical process that they could figure out. So it's a form of life that we've never seen before. The next discussion goes to, well, if this is possible on Earth, we have InSight landing on Mars, trying to see what's on the inside of Mars. Deep on the inside of Mars, it's possible down well below the crust, there's the same type of life living there today, because we know there was water on Mars. There's water on Mars now. We know that. It's on the poles. We found it. We know there's organic compounds on Mars. We found those. That's a way that NASA doesn't want to say life, but says life, organic compounds. Look up organic compounds in the dictionary. It'll say life. So that's what we're dealing with here. We're looking at something, we're looking at a fairly advanced civilization, mathematics, language from 4,900 years BC that also seemed to understand what was going on in this limitless space that we can just barely comprehend today.
So in ancient alien theory,
Yes.
man actually was a hybrid
Or created from the sky gods.
Wow.
And if you go to places, you're going to hear these stories. You're going to hear in southwestern United States, you're going to hear about sky gods.
Yep.
You go to Hawaii. Let's say somebody's going to Hawaii. If you listen to the people there speak about They're going to talk about the earth, the sky, and the gods, where the gods came from. You're going to hear their very similar stories. It's funny how all over the world, Egypt, and I could bring up pictures, we're going to see they talk about, again, the sky gods. The sky gods always came from the sky. Why is that? Well, in the ancient astronaut theory, you're going to hear a lot of people say, well, this was myth and religion. Okay. You have to understand that a lot of discoveries that we made, archaeological-wise, I got that out, was made during the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, where we didn't have technology that we have today. So when we looked at them, we said, well, science defines our reality, and science at the time didn't know anything about airplanes or rockets, so then it must be myth or religion. Today, if we were to look at some of this very same information, because we know about this, we might redefine what we're seeing there. So some of the ancient astronaut theorists are saying these ancient people weren't stupid, okay? They weren't just drawing pictures for no reason on a cave wall or recording this. It must have been important to them. They were reporting what they saw in the terms which they could describe it.
Are there pictures that look like astronauts? I mean, what are these pictures?
There are absolutely pictures that look
well, I mean, when you
like
think
astronauts.
about, when you hear religion, they talk about angels flying and
well,
when
angels,
you see wings on people. I mean, where'd this come from?
Well, ancient, yeah, well, and that's it. We have wings on people. We have flaming astronauts, chariots of the gods, Ezekiel's chariots.
Oh.
This is an image from Abydos in Egypt. And we talked about this once before. Abydos was a very important city. Pilgrimage. The Egyptians made pilgrimages to Abydos. Okay, and this was found actually as they were working within one of the tombs, and they actually cut down part of the wall, and this was behind the wall. And of course, the archaeologists immediately said, "Oh, this is graffiti." Well, okay. Now,
what does it mean? Yeah.
If I looked at this in the 19th century, the 18th century, I'd say, "Wow, that's some wild stuff." But if I look at some of this today, for instance, this item right here, what is this?
Looks like a helicopter.
Looks to me like a helicopter. Okay? And if you were to come down here, this could be an airplane or a submarine.
Yep.
This could be a submarine here. What are these objects? Okay? These are some of the things that we've seen from the ancient astronauts. So now we have this planet out there that is coming, that the Sumerians described. We have some of these things that we're seeing here. This is from Egypt. This is Nefertiti and her husband.
Oh, okay.
Akhenaten, thank you. Akhenaten
yeah.
over here. And they're holding their children.
No.
And above them is the sky god.
Akhenaten, he was the one that said there was one God.
He's the one who said there was one God.
Akhenaten?
He changed everything. He wanted to get rid of all the gods. The other thing about Akhenaten, too, was he was never represented as one of the beautiful people, which they would always do with their pharaohs. He was shown as he was, which they said he really wasn't a very good-looking pharaoh. But they always talked about the sky god. And that's the sky god up here. And people would say that relief actually represents a sphere, not just an oval, but a sphere. And according to ancient archaeologists, they said that that sphere was giving them life. But after we saw some of the things and some of the stories from Roswell about spheres, crystal spheres containing data, and today we know about the Superman memory crystals, which are spheres, crystal spheres containing data. Some archaeologists have revised their assessment of this and saying what this actually is a crystal sphere sharing knowledge to the king, the queen, and their children. And this becomes very possible when you look at this, because nobody's really clear what the hieroglyphics mean on any of this. But now we're saying this is knowledge that's being shared from a crystal sphere. Look at it, 19th century, makes no sense. Look at it mid 20th century, probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, some people will believe it, but it doesn't. You get into the 21st century, some of the things we're learning, Superman memory crystals, nuclear-powered diamond batteries, all this stuff might in fact be possible. Now this is hard to see, but this is Pumapunku in Bolivia.
Who?
Pumapunku, we talked about that. You have Pumapunku and you have Tiwanaku in Bolivia. These monoliths were created by a civilization that had no language, did not possess the wheel, and had at best copper tools. Now what we're looking at here is sandstone, which could be carved by copper tools, but probably not likely. This is andesite. You cannot carve that with copper tools. And it's from the same site, and the problem with this is that some of these stones weigh upwards of 20 tons. How do you move them?
How do you move them?
Okay? Even if they could move them along the ground, how do you lift them? They did not have the wheel. They did not have language to write instructions. It all had to be done. So how was all of this done? There was a show we were watching the other night. I don't know if anybody else is watching. I love the show. We'll give them a plug. The Curse of Oak Island.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Now, they're getting ready to do a dig at the cove, and they want to bring in these big cranes. What's the first thing they had to do to get the cranes to the cove? They had to reinforce the road.
Absolutely.
They could not move these 300-ton cranes, or the cranes could lift 300 tons, but they were like a 170-ton crane. They could not move them over the road because it was too soft. How did these people move these things? This is another wall at Pumapukuku. Again, you could create a right angle tool to measure angles, but how do you carve them without having a harder piece of steel? Here's the thing about Bolivia when we talk about ancient astronauts. This is a wall, and all over the wall there are all kinds of faces carved. Okay, anybody could do that, but the interesting thing about the faces, when you look at them, they are faces from all over the world. You will see Oriental faces. You will see African faces. How did these people who did not possess language, how did they know about all these faces? How could they carve them? Or did they have help? And this goes in all the way back to the Sumerians, where they say somebody came, and that they reside here today. This is King Pakal's. This is the top of his sarcophagus. And in the center, you can see the king. And this is supposedly when he died and he left the earth to move on to live with the sky gods. He got into this, whatever this was. But it sure looks to me like somebody sitting there looking into a periscope, which we would say might be a space capsule.
Wow.
All right.
So now, where did the breakdown happen? You know, you look at back, thousands of years and everything. So was there something that happened to the Earth where all this was just? I mean, what happened where?
There were a lot of things.
No, that's the thing. This is all those years ago, but there had to be a breakdown somewhere.
You had the Great Flood, which did exist.
Mm-hmm.
We lost a lot in that. The libraries at Alexandria were burned to the ground. Now, some people say some of the information that was in that library is in the Vatican's archives, but they won't release it. Yeah. We lost a lot there. We hear constantly in the ancient astronaut theories, I heard from the people I talked to, that there's been 3 civilizations before the ones we even know here on Earth. This is an interesting photo when we talk about a thing called xenoarchaeology, which is the study of extraterrestrial artifacts. And people say it doesn't exist, that's not a real science. Well, it is today, because there's stuff on Mars, we put it there and we're aliens, so there's xenoarchaeology. But this is something that was found on Mars. And some friends of mine at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they'll go, okay, we'll tell you this, but don't say anything. The scientists there are disagreeing as to whether or not this was done naturally by natural erosion or not. Some say it can't be. What we're seeing here is a lioness. You see her nose right here? You can see her nose, you can see her ears, and she's laying on her side. And then over here we have an interesting thing that's carved on right angles. That doesn't happen anywhere on Earth that we know of naturally. So is there something to the whole ancient astronaut theory on Mars as well? This is a 14th century fresco from de Gelder.
From what?
A guy by the name of de Gelder. I didn't know him. He was a little before my time. This is the baptism of Christ. Okay, and we can see what's in the sky. Why did he do this fresco in the way that he did it? Now, this doesn't mean all this is true. It just means there's some good questions here. Why was this as it is? And this is another fresco from the 14th century. I don't know what it is.
So he was an artist that did these in the 14th century.
Yeah. So what we're getting at, the whole concept here is Planet 9, is it Planet Nibiru? Is it coincidence that the Sumerians described something like this 4,900 years BC? Is it coincidence that this follows the ancient astronaut theory? Now, the troubling thing about this is the Sumerians believe that they were here and that they remain here to this day. Okay, that's what this whole theory presents to a lot of people. So the issue that we have here and what we want to talk about tonight is, are we looking at proof or corroboration to some of these stories that we've been hearing over the years? Now in the 21st century, we have the technology to actually discuss this.
Rick, also, when you start talking about religion and what's going on here, it begins to be a very interesting subject.
It becomes a very touchy subject.
That's right. I mean,
well, there's a difference between religion and God. There's a huge difference.
Spirituality.
Wrap it up. So.
Yeah. Well, as usual, Rick, time is flying, and we're going to have to call it a day today as we run out of time. I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. And I also want to remind people that please email us at theviewshow@aol.com. We really want to hear your feedback. And as usual, Rick, you're right on your game, I have to tell you. Thank you and good night.